Labdien, godātie konferences viesi! Sākam
Good afternoon,
konferences daļu. Trešā
dear
konferences
guests of the
daļa
conference.
tā, kurā mēs vēlētos
Let's start the third session of this conference. And now we'll discuss the involvement of civil society, the cooperation with the institutions, and if the civil society believes in cooperation with the institutions.
karikatūras
Please have a look at these posters of the conference. We found an artist who, in his unique style, depicted the development of the industrial development in the city and what the future could look like, what the futuristic society could be like. Without much ado, I would like to give the floor to Aigars Freimanis, to present. Hello, everyone. Everyone who misses the beginning of the conference is a loser. However, sometimes it's quite the opposite. In any case, if you're late for the beginning of the conference, you miss the vibe of the conference. So I will start from scratch. Anyway, I'm hoping that I'm more a winner than a loser. The topic might seem a little bit boring compared to other topics you've heard before. I'm the graduate of the Faculty of Philosophy, and since then a lot has changed. And at the time that I was studying, the concepts of mental change was used, the professionals smile. Very often people assign their own meaning to certain concepts. If I'm not mistaken, in 1966, this building was the venue where the institution of communal services was situated. And I remember when I was a kid, I used to come here with my mom, and I saw cars transporting various goods. So it was very interesting for me as a kid to be here. So about my study. The study was commissioned by the Freeport of Riga Authority, and the study is aimed at establishing the changes in public opinion over time. Yesterday in the morning, we finished drafting the diagrams of the study. I will give you a short insight. I won't be able to discuss the entire set of outcomes. In any case, it will illustrate the public opinion. Namely what the residents of Riga think of the port and what the residents of the port neighborhoods think of the port. So we had several other target groups of respondents. However, they are not so closely related to the port, either professionally or otherwise. Therefore, I will only illustrate this target group of respondents. Let me find the first slide. Can you help me with the remote control, please? Methodological information about the two studies I specified. The survey of the residents of Riga. You see a map to the right. In first case, 360 inhabitants of Riga were surveyed. It is a standard selection. The general selection to depict opinions in entire Latvia would be 1,000 inhabitants. I will not go into methodological details. For example, stratification. A stratification means that people are not surveyed in the vicinity of a certain shop or in a public venue, but the interviewee visits the respondents in their homes. And we use computers so we can follow the process real time, and we know how long the interview has been. In such a way, the survey outcomes are more valid and the process easier to control. The second survey, the residents of the port neighborhoods. This target group could be the most sensitive. The neighborhoods are Bolderāja, Daugavkrīs, Kundziņu sala, Voleri, and Sarkandaugava. This selection was artificially increased. So we surveyed 302 respondents to have a representative sample. And as in the previous case, we used computer-assisted personal interviews in the respondents' homes. What were the challenges? This is the year of election, and in the year of election, people face a lot of pressure from various sources of information from the public communication. And we didn't manage to finalize the survey by the end of the election, and we had to resume after the election. If during the election period we were ringing on the doors, people didn't even open and didn't want to participate, and even were even swearing. So these diagrams you will see in the course of the presentation, shows the opinion of the residents of Riga, including the residents of the port neighborhoods. So what associations do you have when you hear the name Riga Freeport? So are your associations rather positive or rather negative? So here we see the feedback. 42%, the majority, have both positive and negative opinions. So this segment is somewhere in the middle. I am the inhabitants of Riga as well. I don't live too far from the Riga port, but the first association I have is when I keep the window open in summer, I hear the noise from the port, the booming of the ships when cargoes are handled. And the sound reverberates really far. In any case, it is not very disturbing. It's quite romantic, I'd say. Negative associations, 21% of the respondents. Well, in the pre-election period, the negative associations have a better reputation, so to say. During the elections, people tend to be more critical. 17% in turn have mostly positive associations. The next survey question, a more focused question. To what extent the following statement correspond or don't correspond to Riga Freeport? The green represents the opinion completely or mostly positive. The yellow represents neutral valuation. The blue the blue have a rather negative opinion, and the gray color represents people who don't know. So these opinions have been arranged from the biggest percentage to the lowest percentage. If you use the statement forced to be reckoned with in the local economy, 69% agree with this statement. It is the dominating opinion. However, this opinion is actually has been dominant in the public thought for a long time. The statement, a growing port oriented towards growth, 52%. So the more specific the questions, the less support they receive. A modern, contemporary port, 46% of respondents agree. People tend to agree. So the port is mostly characterized with a plus. The port with the high quality services, still the green color dominates, 39%. The blue could be merged with the gray segment. The negative opinions are relatively few. A friendly venue for the neighborhood residents, 23% agree with this statement, and the majority of the respondents don't agree, 32%. So this statement has a negative connotation. The port, where the environmental standards are complied with, so there are more negative opinions than there are positives, which shows two key issues in the public perception of the port. So sometimes Freeport of Riga or Freeport of Riga Authority do not want to be compared with the enterprises which work in its territory. But for the public, all of these entities are the same thing. So with all the statements related to environmental protection have this negative connotation and perception. To what extent do you agree to the following statements? So that's the. So if the question is formulated in this way, you are supposed to agree or disagree. So the options here were commonly or mostly agree, commonly or mostly disagree, a neutral evaluation, and don't know the answer. Riga is a big port, and it is always people have a positive perception of that. People also have a positive perception of Riga as a big port with a good economic impact for the city and the residents. I am proud of the Riga port. This statement is very risky. People may start challenging this statement. Why should I be proud of the Riga port? So 36% have agreed to this statement, which is quite a high percentage. It is a very subjective question. Being proud of something is a very intimate feeling and a provocative. The statement is very provocative in its nature. So the residents of Riga, questions residents of Riga, how do you evaluate the work of Riga Freeport Authority? Positive or rather positive 37%, negative or rather negative 23%. The outcome seems very positive. However, there are 40% of respondents who could not answer this question. As soon as people are asked questions about the ecological problems, they are seemingly more knowledgeable. It is not clear if they're really more knowledgeable, but we see the difference in perception when answering to the questions. How satisfied are you? And this question was asked to the Port neighborhood residents. How satisfied are you with your life in the respective neighborhood? Are you very satisfied or rather satisfied? Are you very dissatisfied or rather dissatisfied? Despite the problems, 76% are satisfied and 23% are not satisfied. So being satisfied and not being satisfied and still staying in the neighborhood are two different things. I used to live in one of these neighborhoods in Sarka and Daugava, and for example, my counterparts in Kunziņsala were real patriots of their neighborhood, and they, for example, ecological problems wouldn't be the reason to leave the neighborhood. However, it was a long time ago. What is your attitude to Riga Freeport? Is it rather negative, neutral, rather positive, or positive? So this question is more abstract. We can assess the work positively, however, have a bad attitude. So 61% have positive or rather positive attitude. Maybe people simply answer the questions without thinking them through, which is often the case in similar surveys. We all think in stereotypes, and during surveys we try to narrow down the stereotypes. And sometimes people do not think their answers through. As soon as you ask the respondents to think more carefully about this, maybe they start swaying in their opinions. In any case, the answers are mostly positive to this question. Let's continue. The residents of port neighborhoods. That question was asked differently. What are the positive aspects living in the neighborhood of the Riga Freeport? At the bottom, I don't know or can't answer 26%, and 19% do not think there are any positive aspects. So these are the issues to be solved. It seems that the majority of the residents, despite living there, do not work at the port. A few of them might, but the most of them simply live in this residential area. This is an open question. The previous questions had responses to be selected. This question, in turn, is an open question. This is not an easy question from many aspects, including that there are so many answers and the surveyors have to group them in a certain way. Very often their first emotional reaction shows the dominant perception. The most of the respondents specified a lot of jobs. The port creates a lot of jobs, and then the percentage of answers diminishes. So 35% shows. So what this perception is what the dominant perception is. There are other answers. For example, the police work has improved revenue for to the state budget and similar. So people had other positive things to mention. The opposite question: what negative aspects are there? We see that the number of people who didn't give any answer has reduced. So what do people don't like? Odors, noise, dust, air pollution, and coal dust. I don't know if this is a common problem, but these issues seem to be important to people surveyed in the neighborhoods. These neighborhoods actually are ancient neighborhoods. They have existed for decades. People have lived there many generations, and the information exchange is very lively there. In the most spontaneous answer, the most numerous answer is usually shows the stereotypes, the actual perception in a specific residential group and neighborhood. So when we asked people to evaluate the reputation of the port, 1, very bad reputation, 10, perfect reputation. And then people could answer on a scale 1 to 10. So we didn't include those who didn't have the answer in these results. So they are both positive and negative opinions. However, there is no clear representation of the opinion. It seems that I have to round up my presentation. Okay, I'll hurry up. How do you evaluate the work of the Freeport of Riga Authority? 41% positively and 29% negatively. The positive responses dominate, as you see. Does it reflect what mass media write about the port? Hard to tell, but that's what the public opinion survey shows. Do the following features correspond to the Freeport of Riga Authority? So here you see that the positive aspects dominate. Are they environmentally friendly? It seems no, because 47% disagree, the blue segment. And if it's an open and honest entity, the answers are rather negative. So we see that there is quite a high proportion of negative answers. The last 3 diagrams, the results are highly positive here. I won't read them, it will take too much time. The positive answers predominate. People mostly agree or rather agree to the statements. For example, it is important for me to live in the respective neighborhood. I have an emotional connection to this neighborhood. The last response. The activities of the Freeport of Riga do not create any problems to my family. Most people rather agree that there are no issues. Finally, the diagram which I prefer, amongst others, these statements show the actual perception. For example, I would like to change my residential area. And the majority of them wouldn't want to change the neighborhood. The communication of the Port Authority with the inhabitants is sufficient. People don't quite agree. So when we talk to the proactive citizens of neighborhood alliances, the answers were rather positive, so maybe they do not carry this information to their peers. Thank you for listening. Don't leave, please, yet. I will allow 2 to 3 questions from the audience. And please speak in the microphone. And before that, I will ask my own question. I loved your presentation. And I would like to find out the following. What about the identity? You live in the port city, and do you feel as part of the port? We used to be a seafarers nation. We used to identify with the port city. What about now? The identity is a very complex concept and consists of a multitude of elements. And identity has got several layers. And I think the port would be somewhere in the from 10 to 20th place. Even among the port neighborhood residents, as foremost people identify with being Latvians or Russians, or the inhabitants of Riga, or athletes, or mothers or fathers. Being proud of the port-related identity may surface, but it wouldn't be one of the, it wouldn't rank high. To be honest, well, if you ask honest questions and do not manipulate, what is your identity, we would receive a multitude of answers, and it would be highly lucky if anyone identified themselves with the port. However, if you asked a closed question with specific answers, for example, do you identify with the port, the percentage of positive responses would be higher. Thank you, a very interesting reasoning. I myself am from Liepāja, and the last 2 generations have seen the port only behind the fence, and here we see very well how people have lost this identity. Any other questions from the audience? Raise your hands, please. Okay, if not, then thank you to the speaker.